Hello. Today I am back with some more Narcos Mexico. And I'm going to be reviewing the second season. Now, for those of you who've seen my previous videos on Narcos and Narcos Mexico, probably already have an idea of my general thoughts about the series as a whole, and a lot of those things still apply. But yeah, the level of quality and storytelling is very consistent throughout all these seasons. But anyway, I'll talk more about my thoughts on this season in particular. First, let me briefly talk about the plot of this season. At the end of season 1 of Narcos Mexico, I didn't touch on this in my review, but at the end of the season, Kiki Camarena ends up getting kidnapped by the drug dealers, and he gets tortured for information and eventually killed. Now, after this, Rafa and Neto, who were two of the drug dealers closest with Miguel in the first season, they end up going down for this. They both get arrested and taken to prison. Miguel ends up just barely managing to escape justice and returns to his top spot as the king of the drug trade in Mexico. However, with Kiki's death, America starts to take a much greater interest in the drug business. They send a team of American agents to try and bring these criminals to justice. So we're introduced to a new band of protagonists. There's Walt Breslin, played by Scoot McNairy, who serves as the main character of the series. I'm pretty sure he was the one narrating the first season, and he narrates this season as well. So he's like the main character. And then there's a bunch of other people in his team that are working with him, but to be honest, none of them really have as much depth as Walt, and most of them sort of blend together. But essentially, Walt and his team, they start the season by going after some of the people who were connected with Kiki's death, and they attempt to gain information on people higher up in the food chain, and they continue to be a nuisance in Miguel's side as they cause more and more issues for the drug business. Meanwhile, on Miguel's side of things, he sort of struggles to maintain his power as the different groups that are working for him come into conflict, specifically Sinaloans and the Tijuanans. They don't like each other and things escalate. And all the while, Miguel is starting to really get into the coke business now. He's working with the Colombians more and more to get more coke in. But he's kind of getting jerked around by the Cali cartel quite a bit. We even have Pacho, who was in Narcos. He features in a few of the episodes in this season. And yeah, he jerks Miguel around quite a lot and tries to screw him over. So Miguel's got a lot of things to deal with on his plate, and he sort of struggles to maintain his grasp on power. This culminates in the last episode of the season with Miguel gathering a meeting with all of the different people in his business, and he's trying to tell them how they're going to run things in the future and explain his plans or whatever. And then everyone starts to pull away. They decide they're leaving and they're not going to work with him anymore. So everyone pulls away, and then not long after that, Miguel himself ends up getting arrested and taken to jail. So that's the general gist of season 2. There's a few things I want to go into more specifics with what Walt ends up doing later in the season. But first, I want to just touch on just a few quick fire thoughts of mine. So, as with the other seasons of Narcos and Narcos Mexico that I've seen so far, it maintains the same sort of level of quality, the same level of moral complexity, tension and suspense. This whole series is very consistent with its quality, I think. I did prefer this season over the first one, though, mainly because the first season had Rafa and he was kind of annoying. But in this season, he's in prison. At some point, Miguel goes to visit Neto in prison. He doesn't end up talking with Rafa, but you just get like a little cameo of him looking from afar. Now, one of the little story arcs in this season, which I really liked, was the whole thing with Pablo Acosta. Pablo Acosta was the main drug dealer running the Juarez cartel, and he worked with Amado, who is Neto's nephew. At the start, Amado has to track down Acosta because he's sort of disappeared, and he finds out that he's looking for this guy because apparently they got beef for some reason. They end up finding him, and like there's a big shootout and he kills him or whatever. Acosta ends up going back with him to Juarez. But in this whole process, we learn about Pablo Acosta's partner, who's an American. And like the series is sort of hinting at and sort of building towards him and his partner like leaving. There's like hints that he might leave the business. This ends up leading to later in the series, Walt actually meets Acosta. They end up talking with each other for a bit, and they're talking about Acosta giving information about the cartels and all that. Walt doesn't get like any definitive answer as to what he's going to do, but Acosta seems to at least be considering the idea of doing something. What he ends up doing is he ends up talking to a journalist, and he gives him some information about the cartels. And then he holds up in this town with all of his loyal men around him. Walt goes to visit him because he wants to convince him to flee to the United States so he can testify against like the cartels and give more information, because there's a lot more information that he could give. He only gave like a little bit, I think. But at that point, the FBI shows up with helicopters and they start gunning everyone down. They're working with some of the Mexican law enforcement there, and they want to kill Acosta. They want to take him out. And there's this whole like action sequence there, and everyone ends up surrounding Acosta in this like building. And there's this scene where Walt goes into the building and talks to him and tries to convince him to leave. See, Walt's got this document, piece of paper, saying that there's like a deal that Acosta can get immunity if he testifies or something. And Walt's like, we just got to get to the border. He's like, I'll stand in front of you. They won't shoot you if I'm standing in front of you. And it's looking like Acosta doesn't really want to do it. And then eventually Walt reveals that Acosta's partner is actually pregnant, and Acosta didn't know that. This ends up working, and Acosta agrees to leave with him. There's this very tense scene where Walt and Acosta leave the building and they're like walking away. You have all of these like law enforcement agents with like assault rifles and everything pointing at them, and Acosta's just like standing behind Walt, and like they're slowly walking away. Acosta ends up deciding that it's not going to work. He's not going to do this. So he pushes Walt aside, pulls out his gun, and is gunned down. The whole arc was intriguing. It was very compelling, and it had me rooting for Acosta just a little bit. He's still a drug dealer, so he deserves what he got, but it had me rooting for him just a little bit. And that whole sequence from them surrounding the building and Walt trying to convince him to leave, it was very, very tense, very suspenseful. I think it's one of the strongest parts of this season, which is why I chose to talk about this thing in a bit more depth. So towards the end of the series, Walt and his gang end up hatching a bit of a plan. So at this point in the story, they've managed to put transponders on a bunch of the Mexican cartel's planes, and they know about this massive amount of coke that the Mexican cartel wants to move. So Walt and his gang end up hatching a plan to intercept the planes when they land and destroy the coke. So they all get together and head out to do this. So they intercept the planes as they land, and they're like easily overwhelm the guards there, and then they like start pouring gasoline on all the bags of coke and all that. One of the people there ends up cutting open one of the bags and tastes what's within, and it's revealed that it's not actually coke. And then they get ambushed. So Walt and his team have to take cover as they start getting pinned down by gunfire. So Walt and a few of his men, like, they run away and trying to escape. A few of them get gunned down, and in the end, I think only Walt and 2 other people from his team make it out. This was definitely the darkest hour for Walt and the protagonists. All their work, all the effort they've put into trying to put a stop to the cartels, and they get, like, gunned down mostly, and then, like, the whole mission is called off. Walt ends up getting reassigned. There's a few, like, you get to see the aftermath of this, how it hits Walt, and it's quite a, you know, it hits quite hard to see, like, Walt be struck down so low. However, I will say that the impact this could have had was lessened by the fact that Walt's really the only character among the protagonists that had enough, like, development that I really felt for him. Like, I don't think any of his companions were really developed enough for their deaths to really, like, hit too hard. So its impact could have been a bit more if there was a bit more development, perhaps. I think the issue is really that aside from Walt, there's, like, about 6 or 7 other people in his group, and they're all new to this season, so they don't get as much screen time and development time as you would want, I guess. That's not to say it's a bad scene. It's still pretty good. It was very tense and suspenseful. Anyway, yeah, so that's my thoughts on Narcos Mexico Season 2. I'm super excited to see what the next season holds, which I believe will be the last season of the entire Narcos series. I will look into and see if there is any more, but I'm pretty sure this is the end. I don't think they're making any more. So yeah, I once again highly recommend Narcos Mexico, and I also highly recommend Narcos. From what I've seen so far, I don't think it matters which series you watch first. But we'll see if Season 3 ties into the original series a bit more. I don't know, I'll talk about it in the next review, I guess. So anyway, take care. I hope you enjoyed the review. Feel free to subscribe if you're enjoying my reviews and you want to see more. And I will see you guys all in the next one.